Boys don't need more freedom, they need more structure. The thought about boys' freedom being the most important part of a boy's growing up life continues to plague me, and I think plagues every other man. You've heard the conversation where people say things like, girls need to be as free as boys. The reason why boys are the way they are, expressive, successful, fearless, it is because they are given as much freedom as they should as boys. Well, I'm here to debunk the myth. I'm also here to tell you that in tackling the male epidemic problem, one that has continued to make the front pages of newspapers, tabloids, and prominent media stations, we need to go back to the root cause of male problem. And I think is the freedom given to boys too early and too much. You're welcome to the Men's Podcast. My name is Amaze Daniel Chukwemeka, and on the podcast, I share with you my thoughts on masculinity, my thoughts on growing up and becoming the best version of myself. And today, I think that we need to talk about male freedom, rather, the freedom that boys get when they are too early. Now, what sparked this conversation? A number of things, and I'll bring you up to speed on them. One of them was this video I watched on YouTube, I think. It was Steve Harvey, the popular Steve Harvey, talking to a woman. The woman was complaining to Steve about how she did not like how her husband was training her son. According to this woman, the husband was being too hard on the boys, was unnecessarily training them in the way she wasn't comfortable with. Now, after hearing her complaints and her passionate explanation of how her husband wasn't doing right by her sons, Steve asked her a few questions. He asked her, "Do you love your husband?" "Yes," she said, "I love my husband." Then he said, "Do you think he's a good man? Is he a good man to you?" "Of course he is. A very good man. I love him so much. He's the kind of man I think everybody should have." Then he asked, "Would you want your sons to be like your husband?" And she said, "Definitely, I want them to be like my husband. I think that if they are like my husband, the world will be a better place." Now, after she answered this question, Steve Harvey smiled, a knowing smile of a man who have heard this before, a smile of a man who understands what fatherhood is about, understands the process of grooming boys to become men. And he said to her, "Let him teach them how to be men. You don't understand what it means to be a man. You don't understand what it means to train a boy to become a man. Let him do it that way." And I think that is important in this conversation, as I will explain later. The second thing that happened for me that made me think about freedom, masculinity, and manhood was a video I saw on a person's page. The person was talking about how this young boy, I think he's like 15, 16, 17, or a teenager, brought a car to the house. I don't know, probably a Venza, one of those cars. And then the father of the boy in the video was still telling the boy, "Take this car out of this compound," reprimanding the boy for bringing a car that expensive for a boy his age to compound. Now, someone else in the video, I think a friend of the boys, was telling him, "Don't worry, don't mind your father, just don't mind him, he's jealous of your success." And while I have qualms with the source of the boys, well, because it wasn't explained there, but being a Nigerian and maybe I'm being a stereotypical type here, but I don't think that was the crux of this conversation. Here's my thought here. The father, seeing that the boy is doing a thing or doing things that are outside of what he thinks and expects the boy to do, reprimanded the boy openly, but the boy wouldn't listen. He shushed his father, and according to his friends, the father did not love him enough. Now, the issue of male freedom is often seen as a blessing. When people talk about men and how free they are, when people talk about how girls do not get the kind of freedom guys get, they say things like, "Look at how the man is allowed to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants." It is portrayed as the perfect definition of training for children. Give them free reign. Boys have free reign. Look at them. Are they not successful? No, no. That's not true. If we look at the stats of boys in jail, look at the stats of boys on substance abuse, drug abuse, look at the stats of men and suicide rates and depression, they keep rising. Now, somebody will say, but that is not, hold on. I'm not saying freedom is the only reason why they are there, but I truly believe it's a foundational curse for this curse. You hear people say things like, boys would always be boys. And what they say, what they mean by that statement is boys will be reckless and do whatever they want to do and it is fine. I am from a state in Lagos. And one of the things I noticed growing up was that boys were not given time to come back home. Boys were not given time to come back from school. They could return from school whenever they want, however they wanted, and it was fine. But the girls, you dare not do that. You're supposed to be at home at a certain time. You should be in bed at a certain time. And some people think that that freedom given to boys and restricted from girls is detrimental to a girl's development. I beg to differ. I disagree there. I think that the freedom that boys get, especially the type I have witnessed, are freedom given to them too early and too much. Boys do not need freedom in that sense, they need structure. What I mean by structure is a boy should be able to or should understand what responsibility means. A boy should understand that his actions have consequences. When a child is given free rein too early, he thinks that he can get away with anything he wants to. So you go to school as a boy and you come back 3 hours later and nobody's beating your behind for doing that because you're a boy. That is what boys do. You do things that are against what your parents want, and while they discipline you, they just let you be because you're a boy. That is what boys do. Another example of this is again from my experience where a teenage boy gets a teenage girl pregnant. I've seen this several times. And here's what happens. When the girl comes to the father or the mother or the parents and say, I am pregnant, they're angry at her, they're angry at the boy. But over time, the anger shifts. I don't even think it ever was on the boy's side, but the anger then heavily rests on the girl. Why did you get pregnant? Why did you open your legs? And all of the reprimands that girls get for getting pregnant. I'm not saying they should be allowed free reign, but nobody chastises the boy for getting a girl pregnant. Nobody says to him, you're such a useless person. You know why? Because we accept that boys are allowed to be useless, that boys are allowed to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, because, hey, they are just boys. But that's not how we grow men. That is not how we groom men. The idea of masculinity for me is rooted in probably two or three core values: discipline and responsibility. A lot of the boys we see these days are not disciplined. A lot of them do not understand responsibility. I've been in this place for a while and I've heard and seen conversations where boys or men in this conversation, young men, early 20s, mid 20s, early 30s, sometimes even 40s, do not understand that they have a responsibility to themselves, responsibility to their women, responsibility to their families, and the community. The demoralization of the world, the degradation of societal values for me is because men have not been taught responsibility and discipline. And so, how do we fix this problem? How do we ensure that the next generation of men who are now boys, or the next generation of men who are still unborn, understands discipline and responsibility? Before I answer the question, I think a lot of times about post-World War II world. America, for example, where a lot of the boys were forced to join the military. Many of them did not want to, but they had to. And you look at what they were able to build post the war, and you say to yourself, I think the war was good sometime. I keep hearing conversations about war, and one of the things that somebody said was how war, especially difficult moments, forces us to think better, forces us to think differently, and to think creatively. I also think for men, what being in the military does for them is that it teaches them discipline and responsibility. The recklessness of masculinity isn't so, it's not given free rein as much. While boys would always be reckless, but that recklessness is confined within a space. It is structured. It is disciplined. They are taught that every of the action has consequences. They are taught that everything they do could and will affect their next man. And there was a sense of brotherliness to them. There's a sense of togetherness about these men. That is why they could go on to build some of the biggest businesses in the world and still stay strong. You look at the businesses we have of today all over the world, many of them by men post the World War, and you realize that these businesses are still existing today because of a certain level of discipline they got from joining the military. Now, I'm not saying every boy should join the military. I am saying that we cannot, again, we should not, if we want a world where men are actually men, where men are taking up the reins of responsibility for building, protecting, and creating a better world for everybody else, we cannot allow men freedom or allow boys freedom too early. Your 4-year-old should know that there are repercussions for his actions. He should know that when he does something out of hand, he will be smart. He should know that he has a responsibility to do certain things in the house. We can't continuously say boys will be boys, meaning boys are allowed to be useless. The other thing for me is that girls get the girl talk. And while the girl talk might not encapsulate all that it means to be feminine, it creates some form of bonding between the mother and the daughter. So the girl talk is when the girl is a teenager or sometimes even 11, 12, and she's close to experiencing her first menstrual flow. The mother, in most cases, calls the child to her and says, hey, sit down. Let's talk about this. What it means for you, how to go about navigating it, how to deal with it, and all of the things that they say. I have never been in that conversation because I'm not a girl, but I've seen my mother do that to my sisters. I have heard people whose mothers did that to them. And I think for me, it's something that boys don't have. There's no father-son conversation. We're not having that talk. Men are not being taught, have not been taught how to be men in the way they should be men. A lot of times, the relationship between most men and their fathers only gets better when the boy gets older. Now, we can always understand that, hey, the man is busy working his butt off to provide for the family. But I also think that boys' trainings are not intentional. Nobody is saying to the boys, these are the things I expect you to do. We expect the boys to know what they should do just by winging it across the world. And while that might have worked so far, it is not working for us anymore. The number of suicide, number of boys in jail, number of men who are depressed, number of men in drug abuse, and all of these social vices that we do not want for society, the number of rapes by men, it is because of boys who got freedom too early and too much. So we need to become more intentional about teaching our boys to be men. There's something somebody said one time about how we don't have rituals that helps boys transition from boyhood to masculinity. In some cultures in Africa, I can't remember which exactly, there used to be this thing. Some of them were basal, stupid ass culture. But it was a thing where boys would gather themselves in a certain age group and perform certain rituals, do certain things. And then those things, after they have been completed, will signify or signal their transition to manhood. Now, I do not know all of the cultures and the things they do, but I think that we need to have some form of transition culture, some form of rituals where boys understand what it means to be men. But beyond all of the culture, beyond all of the other parts of, I think, the main problem and the solutions for them, I think we need to start saying to ourselves as men, as fathers, as uncles, boys do not need too much freedom too early. We need to put structures for them. Boys need to have structures. Those structures are what makes them better versions of themselves when they get older. Not the freedom, not the ones where they don't understand that actions and decisions have repercussions. When we start giving structures to boys, start allowing this freedom we give them to be within a frame, to be within a box, we would see that we'll have better men. Now, this for me is not the ultimate solution, but I think we can start from there. We can start being more intentional with training our boys to be men and giving them freedom, but freedom with structure and discipline. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you can follow me as I talk more about the things that matter to me when it comes to masculinity, business, and everything in between. On Facebook, it is at the Man's Podcast, and on YouTube, it's at Emeka Omesi Pod. Follow me and let's have a conversation. Of course, like they say, this is where I talk, and I want you and I, guys, to be part of the conversation. One word at a time, one video at a time. You're making a better world where men are men. See you on the other side of the conversation. Bye.